Hey everyone, it's the Knitting Professor, here to address the question of whether knitting is political or apolitical. Let's get into it. By the way, while I'm addressing this question, I am knitting on these socks with this yarn from Natural Yarn and Fiber. That touch your heart and spirit, and the colorway is perfect because the colorway is calming. So we're going to start with political. In what way is knitting, and let's be inclusive here, crafting, fiber crafting, political? So let's start with the first point. First point about what makes knitting political is the rejection of mass production. So socks are a case in point with me. I learned the hard way that I need to reject mass production of socks because, number one, they don't fit very well, and number two, they cut off my circulation when I buy the Nike socks. So I can wear them on rare occasion, but an all-day stint where I'm out mowing the yard or something like that, I've got to have my hand-knit wool socks that actually fit me, because guess what? Mass production is very limited, and it's only been around for a short amount of time. And it's very deeply tied up in the political system because it revolves around capitalism and the political systems that have been in place over the past couple of centuries are very tightly intertwined. So by rejecting mass production, I'm doing something political, and I do that all the time when I knit socks, and to a degree when I knit sweaters. Now, I do have less of a problem wearing mass-produced sweaters. Hey, Paris. Paris has a lot of points to make in this question too, but unfortunately she speaks cat, so we probably won't include her. But socks, I can't wear mass-produced socks. I can't. I reject mass production when it comes to socks, and in a way, I could say I reject mass production with the boots that I wear because they are generally not mass-produced. Kitty cat, you're in my way. We love your fur, but kind of taking up a lot of the camera. Next point, political aspects of knitting, asserting bodily autonomy. And this kind of goes along with the whole mass production argument. Another issue that I face, issue my daughter faces, issue my daughter-in-law faces is big feet. Mass production, do you think they care about how big our feet are? No, because they only care about average sized bodies. And to a degree, they also only care about bodies that fit an ideal. So I remember back in the day where there was a controversy about Abercrombie and Fitch that they didn't like the idea of homeless people wearing their clothes because it gave them a bad image, So asserting your bodily autonomy and thumbing your nose at the people who just want everyone to look the same ideal way that gives them the most money, that's a big deal. And I try to I try to follow makers who are size inclusive and stuff like that. I think it's really important. And, there's also the issues of women with mastectomies. I have an issue right now as far as bodily autonomy with bras. I used to be able to find cotton bras left and right. Now they're all made of plastic. Am I going to wear that crap? No. That's my bodily autonomy. I'm not going to wear that stuff, but even though I'm being told to everywhere I go, So this is kind of a political statement. So as far as applying to knitting, I like to wear natural fibers. I'm not going to wear a polyester sweater. I'm going to make one of wool if it kills me. Because I need that for my body. I need my body to feel comfortable, to be able to move, to be able to express itself. And when I make my own clothes, that is part of that whole phenomenon. In fact, I've considered learning how to make my own bras, and haven't ruled it out. If you all know of a good way to do that, let me know, because I probably have the equipment. Point 3, feminist reclamation of women's work. It's sort of like the whole notion of gays calling themselves queer. That was it was denigrating. And no, we're reclaiming it. We're saying, nope, that's who we are, and we love it. We're reclaiming it. So, I'm not the most feminine person in the world, as you can probably tell. But I'm a woman, and I really figured that out when I gave birth to 3 kids and nursed them for 8 years. So, I like the fact that there are certain crafts that are associated with being female. I like being female, and I like asserting my femininity by taking these crafts that were denigrated as women's work and saying, nope, I'm proud of it. I take it out in public. I wear what I make. Somebody made a nice compliment to me today on the sweater that I had on, and it made me happy that, I can do this women's work. My mom taught me all kinds of things that could be made with sewing and crochet and needlework and stuff like that. She did crazy things like upholstering furniture in our living room. I mean, it was just crazy what she was capable of doing. And I haven't learned half of what she taught us, but I learned knitting, and it's women's work, and I'm proud. Let's look at point 4, embracing sustainability and slow living, very political. I often use the hashtag slow fashion when I post my videos because I look at myself as an advocate for slow fashion. I look at myself as someone who is pushing the agenda of slowness in life to the degree that I can. And, there are limits. I mean, we're embedded in this world where it's everything is fast paced. I mean, I work my ass off every day, just doing a lot of stuff to succeed. Even as a retired person, I find, and a lot of people who are retired, they find this is like, no, it doesn't make a difference. It barely makes a difference. So sustainability is also very important to me. And, we've reached a point in the US where even mentioning that word is practically a cuss word. So just by mentioning the word sustainability, by looking deliberately for fiber that's organic, that is recyclable, that is biodegradable, we're being political. We really are. And I'm definitely political in that way. I definitely embrace slow fashion to the extent that I can within my limitations. I try to push it. I have sewn clothes. I have knitted clothes. And I try to, watch like how I wash them and just everything surrounding slow fashion is important to me. As far as, even to the point of wearing men's clothes because women's clothes won't last. I do that on a regular basis. Here's another point, economic resistance. It all kind of goes together with what I've already been saying. But when you are in a community where you can trade yarn, you can barter yarn, you can get your materials in a way that sort of obviates the, places like Hobby Lobby and Michael's and stuff like that. They're out there to make a profit. It is a kind of economic resistance. And just the fact that I haven't bought socks at a store probably in at least a year, and that wasn't for me, it was for my son. It's a kind of economic resistance, and it is important because of the way that oligarchs and billionaires have just taken control of everybody's wallets. I mean, every day I've got people tugging on my wallets, Amazon's there, oh, won't you like to look at this item? Or, some other company is there, Best Buy, oh, we've got this big sale, come on, you're going to miss out. Or, last day. I mean, you're just being manipulated economically nonstop. So by making something, I'm pushing the agenda of, no, I'm just going to use my own labor, thank you. Another aspect that makes knitting and crafting political is the whole idea of community solidarity. So there are some knitting communities that thrive on doing something to counteract the baneful influence of, modern capitalism and the rat race by, knitting for charity or deliberately collaborating in, trading materials or giving each other lessons so that you can not only knit, but you can also crochet and you can spin and you can do Tunisian knitting, etc., etc. So sometimes those communities, those fiber communities, they go beyond just the crafting aspect of it, and they make pussy hats and they go out and they, protest. There's also another point, the visibility, making craft labor visible, pointing out that it is still valuable for us to make things with our hands, because we're just told all the time, convenience, convenience, convenience. Go out and just get whatever the really rich CEOs tell you to buy that's been made by slave labor over in, Bangladesh. And that way they can make their money. And we have what they tell us we need, which is convenience. And we don't see what labor went into that product. We don't see how people may or may not have suffered to make that product, how they're being held down by, being given the opportunity only to make that product, to do that labor for that fast fashion, whatever it is, garment that's made of terrible fabric. By making craft labor visible, by going out there and doing our thing, like knitting in airports and knitting in hotel lobbies and wherever it is, we're sort of pointing out, look, this is a slow process. This is tedious. It takes me weeks to make a pair of socks. And, even with the machines that are available in factories, it still takes someone a lot, they spend their whole day just making stuff. And that's all they're given the agency to do. and we buy it and we don't see it because we go to this flashy department store with all these bright lights and stuff like that makes everything look all pretty, and it just hides, it just totally erases all the labor that went into it. So by doing this, especially where people can see it, we're making craft labor visible, and that is political. Another aspect, so the last point I want to make on the political side of knitting, then we'll get to the apolitical side, is cultural preservation, particularly among colonized and marginalized groups. The idea of cultural preservation, that's huge. It's like preserving your identity in the face of colonizing forces that try to subsume it or erase it or make it seem less than. Like I have a chapter in the book that I just recently published about Ojibwe hand weaving. And I point out that it's a way for the Ojibwe natives to preserve their culture, their way of being, their relation with the earth and the materials that come from the earth. And I know people who will deliberately learn crafts from marginalized communities so that they can perpetuate that craft and join the community and be a part of it, and, do it in a way that is definitely political. So those are some points, and I'd be curious, which ones you kind of agree with, which ones maybe I'm missing or I should have emphasized more. But let's look at the other side, the question about, is knitting apolitical? Can knitting be apolitical? And I think it's important to debate these issues and to look at both sides. And, as an author, I advertise myself as an author of inclusive knitting needles, and obviously hey Paris, I am privileging marginalized groups that in the past have sort of been told, no, you don't belong. And those are exactly the people that I want to bring into my novels and declare that, yes, they do belong. But being inclusive also means, listening to all the voices. And I try to have a variety of characters. Let's face it, a lot of my characters are professors, a lot of my characters are students. They believe in education. But they have husbands and they have friends that aren't necessarily. And I think having a very wide view of things and being able to look at things from multiple angles is important. So that being said, we're going to look at the apolitical dimensions. To what extent can we regard knitting and crafting as apolitical activities? Number one, meditative. So we talk about that a lot. I've talked about it a lot, the idea of just getting away from things, meditation, getting into your own head, and seeking refuge. In many ways, hey Paris, she's eating my sack. This whole idea of crafting as a refuge, I think, is really, really important. It's part of just trying to maintain our sanity, maintain our sense of self, our sense of balance, and patience, and the ability to survive and persist. Because it doesn't matter if it's politics or not. There are a lot of things that challenge us as far as, our will to go on. I mean, people lose loved ones. People experience disability. People experience trauma. People get scammed. There are just so many things that can mess with you. And knitting and crafting can be a huge refuge from all of that, whether it's political or not. And just take your mind away from things that are irritating or annoying or controversial, etc. So as a meditative act, knitting is very important on the apolitical spectrum. Secondly, let's look at personal expression. So knitting and crafting are ways to express your own private creativity apart from political division, political controversies, just to say, I'm me, here I am. And it's just so refreshing sometimes to just be in a place where the only thing that really matters is kind of like the here and now and who you are, and to recognize, that we're multidimensional, multifaceted, rich human beings, just to assert our humanity, as they would say in German, an und für sich, like per se, just, that's it, I'm human, I'm of stardust, I'm a child of the universe, and I have my own individuality, and I can use my crafting to express my own personal identity, being in the way that I want, regardless of the time, place, or issue that's going on. Third point, knitting and crafting can also be regarded as universally human activities. I mean, who doesn't practice crafting? When you think about it, especially if you look historically, not necessarily like today with all the mass-produced stuff, but over time, historically, All humans participate in making things. That's just part of who we are. I remember raising that point in chapter 4 of my book 1, my novel, where I mentioned this philosophical notion of homo faber, man the maker. It's something we all do. And it can surround the notion of care instead of critique. Making things for yourself, making things for your family, making things for your friends, for your community, caring, just reaching out and taking care of each other, not telling each other off or critiquing or taking issue or participating in controversy. It can be very healing in that way. Let's look at the next point. So going back to the idea of tradition, the idea of continuity of tradition. This kind of reminds me of my interactions with Hungarian culture as a scholar over the years, because Hungary has had so many traumatic experiences with governments and economy and the way it was run, with a monarch here and a dictator there, and then there was capitalist time, and then there was time when all the money came from the outside, and then there's authoritarian. just everything under the sun. Different versions of dictatorship, communism, socialism, religious rule, you name it, and they had it. And yet, the culture of the people, the language, the literature, the fiber, all of that stuff persisted. And it didn't really shift and wobble significantly just because certain groups were in power, People would still sit at home in their private spaces, and this is true, I think, most anywhere, unless the trauma is the level of autonomy is just so severe that people can't function. But generally, people continue their traditions regardless of what's going on up above. There are exceptions when things get really bad. And, especially under colonization, that, literally that has contributed to the downfall of cultures. And that's one of the worst kinds of destructions that there is. But otherwise, under a lot of circumstances, the political can just kind of wash over us, and we can just keep being who we are as a collective and have our traditions with regard to, even things like knitting patterns and styles and garments. And it's really cool to look at the traditions that have come out of different countries. I think in particular of like Iceland or the Faroe Islands or the Shetland Islands, and just to see that regardless of the political winds, they had certain ways of doing things that were just culture. And, it was not necessarily in ignorance of political phenomena, but sort of maybe alongside and in its own lane. I think that's a really cool way to look at it. How about another point, community without agenda? Sometimes we just get together with fellow crafters. And, sometimes we even avoid talking about politics because we know if we go there, it might get ugly, and we don't want to do that because that's not who we are in that moment. In that moment, we are fellow crafters, we are fellow knitters, we are fellow crocheters, we are fellow spinners, we are fellow fiber aficionados. And it's a great reminder that there's more to us than politics. There's more to us than parties, ideologies. There are other dimensions of being human that don't necessarily relate directly to our political affiliation. And sometimes I think we have more in common than we know, or than we remind ourselves of, or than we think, And so when we can get together over other phenomena, such as knitting and crafting, could be Al-Anon, could be all kinds of things that you can get together with other people. I was just left a band rehearsal. I don't know what those people think, but all we cared about in the moment was making music together. And sometimes in a knitting group, all you care is knitting together, enjoying tea together, and being together, and being human beings. One person next to the other. It's so refreshing, again, as I said before, to be in that moment and just to remind yourself, we're just human beings. We're all just, for the most part, we're all just trying to do the best we can. Right, Paris? Then we have got 2 more points. Aesthetic detachment. The idea of quiet neutrality. There is such a thing as pursuing aesthetic beauty. Beauty for its own sake. And I think most humans have some notion of what they consider to be beautiful, and our collective notions of the beautiful have a lot in common. There's definitely a huge range, and there are all kinds of ways of getting at it, and we are often told what to regard as beautiful, by commercial commodified agents, which, you know, that's exactly what we don't want. But if we just think about it from, you know, like a little more of a universal level of what constitutes beauty globally, you know, universally, timeless beauty, that kind of thing. There's a lot we can agree on. There's a lot that we can agree on. And when we pursue beauty as crafters, it's just rewarding in and of itself. That it's you know, like the person commenting on my sweater today. I'm sure they found it beautiful because they like the colors and they like the harmony and the geometry of it, you know, and it has nothing to do with party affiliations or critiquing the economy. It's just pretty. It's just pretty. And then last point I want to make, no, you can't have my Paris. She's ready for me to quit. Yeah, honey. Escape from the logic of productivity. An overt refusal to assign political weight to everything. So I respect this idea that you can work to rise above the political. Let's put it that way. There are times when we can't afford to. Let's just be honest. There are times when we can't afford to. But if we can afford to, it can be a beautiful thing to try to rise above the political and to rise more towards an ethical, moral way of being that embraces love, embraces connection, embraces beauty, embraces community, and embraces what the philosophers call flourishing, which I think everyone should have. Everyone, that's what we're here for, to my way of thinking, is to flourish, is to be well. That's really what we should be concentrating on. So there you have it. Those are my points, and Paris has gotten herself all tangled up here in my project bag. But I would love to know your thoughts. Obviously, be kind. This community is wonderful. I've seen very few examples of people being unkind. It has happened. It is rare, and I'm very grateful. So in the spirit of sharing and open debate, you know, if you wanted to weigh in on the issue, the notion of whether knitting and crafting are political or apolitical or neither or both, would love to hear your points. And I appreciate your listening. I hope everyone has a really great, productive, and calm-inducing week where you can flourish and thrive and enjoy your crafting. Y'all take care. Ciao.